Good evening everyone, and welcome to day 11 of the 40 Days of Hope, and today's message is for any of you scientists out there who struggle to trust the Bible. I've asked a good friend Jeremy to share with us today. He is the most educated scientist that I know personally, and he goes to my church, and he's just going to share some of his thoughts to get us thinking on the topic. Last week you would have read one of my favourite Psalms, Psalm 8, and verse 3. It says, "Whenever I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is mankind that you are mindful of them, human beings that you care for them?" See, I love science, especially physics, and my mum when I was younger got me a book, How Things Work, and I've always had such a passion. I just think science offers powerful tools to study God's creation, and I love how the famous scientist Johannes Kepler put it, that science enables us, I suppose, to think God's thoughts after him. Now, after listening to and watching tonight's videos, if you have any further questions, if you still feel that science is a barrier for you trusting the Bible, Jeremy has kindly agreed to join us all for a Zoom session, especially for the 40 Days of Hope and you guys who are seeking out there. So please do personal message me if you are interested in that, or if you don't know me, you can email 40daysofhope2021@gmail.com. Guys, this is really a once in a lifetime opportunity for you to ask your questions and to get new perspective on these things. And if you're too shy for a Zoom, feel free to email me any questions you might have. Okay, thank you Jeremy for sharing tonight, and enjoy your reading, guys.
Hello, my name's Jeremy. Bernie's asked me to say a few words to you today. I trained as a chemist and did a degree in chemistry and then a PhD in the chemical origins of cancer. And since then I've worked as a scientist in industry, initially in pharmaceuticals and more recently in medical technology. And I sometimes get asked, how can you as a Christian also be a scientist? Surely there's a great conflict between the two. And the way I answer that question is really to think about roads. So, for example, if I wanted to build a road, I would have to learn how to do it. I would have to go to highway engineering textbooks and learn exactly how you build the foundations, how you put the next layer in, how you make sure the road is the right shape so that it drains well, maybe how you build bridges and and junctions, and all sorts of things would have to be studied before you could start and understand how to build a road. On the other hand, if I wanted to drive down the road or cycle down the road, what I need to understand is what are the rules are. How does it work? I don't really need to understand how it's made. I need to know how fast to go, when to stop, who has priority, what happens when I get to the end of the road. All of these sorts of things. And to understand and learn about that, I would read a little booklet called the Highway Code, because that sets out the rules of the road. And so, in a way, the Bible is like the highway code. It explains how to use this world and how God wants us to live. On the other hand, science and technology is like the book on highway engineering. We understand and learn how things work, how we can use things, how we can develop those things as well. And it is important that we recognise that when we think about the Bible, it's not trying to be, and it's never intended to be, a scientific textbook. So for example, the Bible will describe things as they observe things. So the Bible in one place talks about the sun rising in the east and then setting in the west. Well, you and I talk about that all the time. We don't suddenly say, oh, well, actually, technically that's wrong, because the earth goes round the sun, so technically it's the earth rising and setting. No, we don't do that, because that would be more difficult to understand, and we talk about it all the time as something as the sun rising and setting, because that's what we observe. And the Bible was written over thousands of years and was and still is relevant to everyone today. Just imagine if it was written as a scientific textbook, how out of date it would become. Or just imagine if it had in there something about, oh, in about 1,000 years you're going to discover this about how things work. That would be crazy, and that wouldn't work at all. So really, science and technology is the job of understanding mechanism, how things work, and that's a job that God has given us. The Bible teaches us about God and how we live and work in the world. And so these things don't really shouldn't come into conflict. Because the other thing to remember is that we sometimes get it wrong, because sometimes people say, well, the Bible's not scientific, therefore I'm not going to take any notice of it. Or sometimes Christians get it wrong because they said, well, the Bible must be scientific, and so they try and force some scientific things into the Bible, and that doesn't work either, because that gets a bit silly, because you can't force things that are mechanisms that I understand now into a text that was written for a different purpose. And so the important thing to do is to remember that everything that is created is part of God's creation. And so science and all the knowledge that's built up over the years is part of what's within that area. God is not just the bits we don't understand. God is the bits we don't understand, and he's also the bits we do understand, because he's greater than all of this. I hope that helps, and thanks very much for listening.